we're going to be talking about some things that are different and new, in a sense, because we are now in a time that the world has never seen before. And we are now in a position where we can understand parts of Scripture that we never really understood before. We know the principle of the Scripture is that a prophet is not known as a prophet until the things that he talks about come to pass. That's a principle from Deuteronomy chapter 18. And we are seeing the things coming to pass and looking and saying, I didn't know that prophecy was talking about that so clearly. But it is. And it's happening before our eyes now. The 7th of October 2023, who knows what happened then? Hamas invaded Israel. What a terrible, terrible slaughter that was. The world has changed dramatically. It has never been like this before. The world has changed brand new that day. And everything is changing rapidly now, so rapidly it's very, very hard to keep up with it. And so what I'll be presenting tonight is as up to date as it can be. But what it's talking about, particularly tonight, when we talk about the year of the ballot and the bullet, the ballot, of course, we're talking about elections, and we're going to see that 2024 was an unprecedented election year all around the world. And the bullet, and of course there are wars going on everywhere, but look, what ballot stands out in your mind in 2024? Trump, the election of Donald Trump. What bullet stands out in your mind in 2024? Trump. So this is a year where things have happened that are quite dramatic and have changed a lot of things and brought us to the time, I believe, at the time of which we've just read in this particular chapter here in Matthew chapter 24, which is one of the three records of the Lord's prophecy on the Olivet prophecy on the Mount of Olives just before he was crucified. And you read there in verse 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Now, we're not talking about literal stars, are we? We know that in Scripture and prophecy, this is talking about the political heavens. The political heavens. Change and turmoil in the political heavens. And we are seeing that happening right here and now. And so I think we're right here in verse 29. Well, then verse 30 says, the Son of Man appears. We are right in this time. So let's have a look at it. The year of the ballot and the bullet. Now, they aren't my words. Actually, they're a commentator who wrote quite an interesting series of articles about elections in 2024 in particular, and about wars in 2024. So it's a good summary of our year that we've just had. So in 2024, the big thing that really struck people worldwide was the anger that was taken out in the ballot box against existing rulers, against existing politicians. Anger and resentment. Why are people angry and resentful? Well, a lot because the cost of living has gone through the roof. A lot because a lot of people are dying unnecessarily in wars. A lot because there's a lot of corruption in the political sphere. And so many countries held their elections this year, and in many of those elections, the existing ruling class or political party, political power was turfed out of office in this what was called a super election year. This is the year right after October the 7th, 2023. It's a very, very significant year. It's the time when the sun and moon and stars are giving us signs of where we are. So signs in the political heavens. That verse, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, the moon shall not give her light, the stars will fall from heaven, the powers of heaven will be shaken. And that's the political powers being changed, being overturned, in some cases revolution, to change the ruling powers and the ruling systems. So this article, which I've researched, of course, beyond that, around half of the world's population, more than 70 countries headed to the polls in that year, 2024, marking what was dubbed the super election year, the biggest in human history. It's never happened before. It is unprecedented. These are changes that the Bible tells us will be signs of the last days, things that have never happened before that you're going to see in the ruling classes. That's what's going on. So 3.7 billion people, there's about 8 billion people now, I think, on the earth. So nearly half the earth were able to cast their votes. Not everybody voted, mind you, but they were all able to. In Australia, we have to vote theoretically. We don't, of course. We don't do so. But in many countries, they have the option. But in most countries, people went out to vote in large numbers to overthrow the existing powers. Many kicking out leaders, this is the words of that article, that they felt weren't serving them. So that's the situation in our world. Turmoil. Now, anybody who watches the news over the last 12 months, and we tend to watch SBS News, it gives you news from a lot of different countries. The first half of the news during the year seemed to be talking about elections, about political disruption, about riots in the streets against the rulers, and all sorts of discontent and seething masses of people protesting in the streets. And it's not only to do with the Palestinian situation, but in many cases, political unrest has marked the whole world. Now, the question is, when the Lord said, we'll give you signs in the heaven, what did he mean by the word signs? Were they something that you'd physically look and see? Well, yes, that's spelled S-I-G-N. No, it's not like that. The signs are, as the word means in the Greek, portending remarkable events that are soon to happen. In other words, remarkable changes coming, and you can tell and you can feel and you can see. A wonder, a prodigy, a portent, highlighted in the yellow, an unusual occurrence, transcending the common course of nature, supernatural almost. A mark or a token by which something is distinguished from something else. So as we said, our year 2024 was distinguished from years that had gone before it because of all the political upheaval and turmoil and unrest. That's a sign. That's a big sign. It's the sign before verse 30 when Jesus says, you'll see the Son of Man coming. Well, here's a parallel of Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, the latter verses of the Olivet prophecy. And you'll see there that they are all quite parallel. In fact, I've done parallels of the entire Olivet prophecy, and you'll see similarities all the way down of the three columns. But I've just chosen to come to the last section, which is the important one where the changes happen. So you read there in Matthew 24, immediately after the tribulation of those days. In Mark 13, parallel. But in those days, after that tribulation, shall the sun be darkened and the moon not give her light. Luke 21 doesn't actually mention the word tribulation at that point. The times of the Gentiles will be fulfilled, and there shall be signs in the sun, moon and stars. Now, we're confident that in Luke 21, verse 24, the times of the Gentiles being fulfilled has relationship to 1967, okay? The time when Jerusalem came back into the hands of the Jews in the Six-Day War. But since that time, as we know, there's been continuing trouble and turmoil for Israel. And Israel, ever since they came into the land, really, has been under tribulation, trials, difficulties, nations around them, imposing themselves on them, wars and terrorism, all the troubles that they've had. Do you know, brothers and sisters and young people, I think in 2023, in October, on the 7th of October 2023, when that war started, Israel's tribulation at this point in time began to finish. It's over. They are no longer going to suffer from the nations close by around them. It's not going to happen anymore. So that time of tribulation, which in fact they've suffered and endured since AD 70, when, as Jesus said earlier in the Olivet prophecy, Jerusalem is going to be compassed with armies and the desolation thereof is nigh, and then there's great tribulation in those days. And that tribulation has continued all down through history. They've been under trial and difficulty and trouble, haven't they? Everywhere they've gone. The sole of their foot hasn't had rest. They feared day and night. They came into the land, and it's, in many cases, it's been the same. Who's going to attack us next? Can we try and make peace with these people? They've made peace with some, but it's still been a time of tribulation. 7th of October changed everything because Israel now begins to dominate. Israel will no longer have to fear the nations around them. That's the result of the last few months. Then, signs in the sun, moon and stars. Political turmoil. That's the timing of it. And I think we can see it happening in our world around us. We're in that verse near the top there. Signs in the sun, moon and the stars. Now, Luke is the only one who mentions what happens on the earth. And we know this is happening on the earth. Distress of nations, perplexity, sea and the waves roaring, the nations roaring against one another, and men's hearts failing them for fear. They certainly are. And if you lived in Ukraine right now and other parts of Europe, your heart is failing you for fear because of the weapons. And there are many other reasons. Looking after those things that are coming upon the earth, for the powers that are in heaven shall be shaken. So the powers are at loggerheads with one another. Nobody quite knows what the answers are politically in our world today. Now, some of you may have seen videos of me talking about the prophecies in Daniel chapter 11, but I just want to give you a brief summary. Daniel chapter 12 in particular. Daniel chapter 12 has 3 time periods that we're being given. 3 time periods which can be easily related and put together once we get the basis of them. The basis of them is that these time periods begin when the abomination of desolation, the last abomination of desolation, is set up in Jerusalem. The abomination of desolation is something set upon the Temple Mount where the temple was that stops people being able to go up there and worship. It's an abomination that desolates the holy place. And we know from history that we can show that that's clear, that the first abomination of desolation was in the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, when he set up a statue of Zeus in the temple and offered a pig on the altar, and that was called the abomination of desolation. The people couldn't go in and worship there. It was defiled until 3 years later when the Maccabees drove the Greeks out and rededicated the temple, and so instituted the Feast of Hanukkah, which starts, by the way, in 12 days' time this year. It's a memorial over 8 days of the re-establishment and cleansing of the temple when it had been defiled by that abomination of desolation. Jesus said the next abomination of desolation you're going to see, look at Daniel, he talks about it, is when the Roman armies come in and desecrate the temple, which they did around 70 AD, as we know. And then there's the third abomination of desolation, which is mentioned in Daniel chapter 12, which is the Dome of the Rock, built right on the Temple Mount. It's an abomination so that nobody can go up there and worship. And for, 1,260 years, near enough, nobody could go to worship, if you were not a Muslim, to worship on that mount. So the 3 time periods in Daniel chapter 12, verses 7, 11 and 12, 1,260 days, times and a half, which is 1,260 years in prophecy, until the scattering is finished. Then there's a period of 1,290 years from the time that the abomination that maketh desolate is set up, and that's 688 AD, when that Dome of the Rock, where the foundation was laid. Go 1,290 years, and there will be free access for all peoples to go and worship. Well, in theory that happened, but in reality it hasn't fully developed yet. Because in 1978, the first peace agreement between Israel and the Arab neighbours was with Egypt, and the president of Egypt said, we're going to make the holy places in Jerusalem acceptable and accessible to everybody. Well, it didn't happen. It wasn't long after that he was assassinated because the Muslims didn't agree with that position. But from that time, there has been a means whereby a few people, every now and again, could go up to the Temple Mount and worship. Although the Arab law was, when you go up there, you're not allowed to take a prayer book, you're not allowed to wear a prayer shawl, can't wear your little Jewish hat, you can't look like you're worshipping. But that actually has changed more recently. And in fact, this year, on one occasion, which is an occasion when the Jews remember the burning of the temple, a particular day, 2,000 Jews went up and actually worshipped. They laid down on the ground, they prayed, they sang, they danced, right in front of the Arab Jordanians who basically have said, well, the rule is you're not allowed to do that. But the Jews are more and more worshipping. So we come to 1335 years, which is the last time period given in the prophecy of Daniel, Blessed is he that waiteth and cometh to the 1335 days from, if you work it out, from 688, that comes to 2023, the year 2023. And in the very next verse, Daniel is told, I'm not going to tell you any more time periods, Daniel, that's it. Go thy way, rest, and stand in your lot at the end of the days. Resurrection. So Daniel 12 begins with the resurrection and ends with the resurrection. You know, that time many that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake and come forth, and some to everlasting life. We hope we're amongst that great number. That's the end of the days. So we're in that time called in Daniel the end of the days. What happens in the end of the days? In the New Testament, it's called the end of the world. And at the end of the world, Jesus says, the angels go forth and collect everybody to resurrection and to come to the judgment seat. That's what he says. That's the end of the world, the end of the days. So we're in that time. And the signs that we're given are political, right at the moment, in the political heavens. So that period of time, as we said, time to the Gentiles fulfilled in Luke 21, certainly in 1967. Luke doesn't say immediately after there will be signs of the sun, moon and stars, but after the tribulation finishes. After the tribulation, Matthew and Mark say, after the tribulation, after all the trials and troubles for Israel, then you're going to see big signs in the political heavens. In fact, 7th of October began the big signs in the political heavens, because none of the politicians know how to handle this situation. The anti-Semitism that's rife around the world, the protests that are going on. Who do they support? Do they support Israel, the Palestinians? Is that going to get them more votes, or no, not as many votes? Are they going to get thrown out of office because they haven't appeased these people or those people? Is the synagogue going to get burnt down, and are we going to react to that in the right way, or what's going to happen? The rulers don't know. And they don't know how to handle the economy. They don't know what to do about the wars that are happening. The rulers of the world are tied up in knots at the moment. You know, they've been talking on about climate change, and now they're not sure that that's really the most important thing. The last climate change conference, not as many leaders went as did before, because some people wanted to pay a lot of money to be paid to smaller countries, to shore up their shores so that the sea doesn't rise too much. And then the other countries who are supposedly pumping out all the pollution and causing all the troubles, they don't want to pay the money. So, politically, the world is in turmoil, it's in chaos. And you can really nominate October 2023 as a date. So what is a sign? A sign is an unusual occurrence that transcends the common course of nature. Something that hasn't happened before. Something unprecedented. Has anybody heard the word unprecedented much? It's the buzzword of news bulletins, isn't it? Everything that seems to be happening is unprecedented. We've never seen anything like it before. It's true. They haven't seen anything as bad as things are now. And so that's the sign that the unusual occurrences are happening, and they're happening in the political world and in many other ways. Let's have a look at it. Another article from Time magazine, the ultimate election year around the world. More than 60, well, this was written before, at the end of 2023. Elections are expected in at least 64 countries, as well as the European Union, which altogether represent almost half the global population, and many of the governments change dramatically. Big events. 3.7 billion people voting. Going on with that article from Time. The year of the election has turned out to be the year governments and parties around the world were punished by the voters. Rising cost of living, immigration pressures saw the demise of many governments in 2024. It was a challenging year for incumbent governments worldwide, many losing power in key elections, even though outright defeat or a reduced electoral support diminishing their ruling mandate. The elections represent a complex interplay of economic pressures, demographic shifts, that's changes in population and evolving citizen expectations. People are on the move around the world, and that's affecting many, many countries. So, looking at some of these key countries, as we said, there's 70 odd of them actually. Big countries where the elections were held and significant changes. So the unclean spirits like frogs are on the move. The unclean spirits like frogs, Revelation 16, the spirits of democracy, liberty, equality, fraternity, the rule of the people rising up. Those are the unclean spirits, and they're spirits of madness that bring the nations to Armageddon, we're told. So what happened in the election in Russia? Putin again. Does anybody think anything else would happen? 80-odd% of the vote. Anybody who's in opposition is sent to Siberia, put in jail and fades away, or falls out of a 10-storey building. Don't know how these things happen. No opposition, 80-odd% approval supposedly in the election. Putin again. And he can stay there until 2036, according to the Constitution, if he gets elected the next 2 6-year elections. So that was easy. United States. Well, right up until the moment of the election, people were wondering, is this, of course the media was putting across this as very evenly balanced. I think a lot of us who really thought that Trump being very much favourable towards the Jewish people will receive the blessing from God and will come into power, but really a landslide, an absolute landslide. Not only, of course, him elected as president, but also the Senate and the Congress, all Republicans, so he can get his legislation through. That's a big, significant thing, because America will come closer and closer to Israel in the coming days, coming weeks, coming months. Mr. Trump is very, very pro-Israel, as we know, and God has blessed him. Now, why wasn't he in power the last 4 years? Well, God had another thing to do. He had to have Russia go to war in Ukraine, to start their move across Europe as Gog takes the land of Magog and eventually Gomer. So all that had to start, and October the 7th had to happen for Israel to be brought to the fore before all the nations of the earth. And so Trump is back in. And he's in now, really. The world is already changing dramatically because of his policies that he's already put forward. And he's already meeting with other leaders and so on. In the United Kingdom, the Conservative Party, who were flipping and flopping around and had, held the vote to get out of Europe, the Brexit vote, but hadn't really implemented it very well. And people were feeling the pressures of the cost of living over there. So the Labor Party got in with a landslide, a huge majority, far more than the Conservatives got under Boris Johnson. That was 80 seats. There's 170-something seats. And yet as soon as they get in, people find out what they're like. And they're really doing some nasty things to the population. I mean, it's winter over there now, and for years, the poorer people and the pensioners have been given a subsidy for their power bills. Labor has taken it away, and people are going to freeze to death this winter because they can't afford to pay their power bills. This is the Labor Party has taken that away. Many other things they've done, increased taxes and all sorts of things. And so they're highly unpopular. I'll talk about a bit more of that in a moment. In Japan, the ruling party that had been there for years was toppled over. In France, there's a huge shift to the right, and it looked as though Marine Le Pen, the right-wing leader over there, might have become the president, or at least the prime minister. But Mr. Macron cobbled together some people on the left and has staved off that change. Of course, when France goes to the right, they are more pro-Putin too. That's an interesting thing. In South Africa, the ANC, the African National Congress, which has ruled ever since apartheid was done away with, basically, has been heavily punished because of all the corruption amongst the leaders there, and they now have a difficulty in governing because of the balance of power there. In India, Prime Minister Modi, he's been very, very popular, you would have thought, but he lost his majority, and he's got to struggle to get laws passed by the parliament. In South Korea, a huge change in their elections and a lot of instability, and so much instability and protest in the streets that the president called for martial law. And that lasted about 6 hours, I think, until the army turned around and said, no, we're not going to impose martial law. We're going to impeach you, Mr. President. And that's what's happening now. So, it's all over the place there as well. And in Germany, the government has collapsed only in the last few weeks. only been in power for 3 months over there, or not very long anyway. It's 3 months in France, not very long in Germany, and that government has collapsed and they're going to have a no confidence vote shortly. I'll just run through that briefly. So these are the changes, you see, that are happening in our world, and God is in control. He rules in the kingdoms of men. We know that the powers that be are ordained of God, don't we? We know the Most High rules in the kingdoms of men. And Mr. Trump, on that particular day, well, it just nicked his ear, and he has said, I was saved by God. Do we believe that? I do. We do. Because the powers that be are ordained by God. Now, he says, I was saved by God. And people ask me, well, why do you think you were saved? To save the world. Well, that's a bit much. And he said, well, maybe to save America. Whatever it is, God wants him there. Now, we don't know how long God wants him there for. He could be assassinated soon, or he may go the distance. And because of his pro-Israel stance on lots of things, and the way he goes about supporting Israel in particular, it does seem that God will bless him and that there will be a number of changes that he will be able to bring in to improve Israel's situation for the time being. And we also said that 2024 was the year of the bullet. And this is the biggest bullet yet. The biggest bullet yet.
Vladimir Putin has long boasted that Russia is developing missiles capable of overcoming all current air defence systems. On Thursday, he made good on his threats, firing a new hypersonic ballistic missile known as Oreshnik. And what he said was a direct response to strikes by Ukraine inside Russia with US and British supplied missiles. At a meeting with defence officials and arms manufacturers, he congratulated them on what he called a successful test and said more would follow.
To hear Vladimir Putin tell us, the cruise missile carried by this rocket is basically unstoppable. Flying at 20 times the speed of sound, it can zig and zag and deliver a nuclear warhead to any target in the world. It goes like a meteorite to its target, boasted Putin, like a fireball. It was a provocative Cold War-style threat, and the audience of lawmakers and business leaders loved it.
The animation is sobering. Russian missiles that could circumnavigate the planet. Nuclear-powered cruise missiles hugging the terrain that could fly effectively forever, with targets that could be anywhere.
He's no bluff. Putin says he's not bluffing, and he's right. He can do this. There aren't many things that Russia can do well. Build big missiles and with large nuclear weapons on them that can destroy our country. They've had a lot of practice.
Russian media said the new missile, fired from the southern Astrakhan region, could reach the Polish capital in just 12 minutes, Berlin in 15, and London and Paris in 20 minutes, raising concern among some European leaders.
Nie zna końca tego konfliktu. Wiemy jednak, że nabiera bardzo dramatycznych w tej chwili wymiarów. Wydarzenia ostatnich kilkudziesięciu godzin pokazują, że to zagrożenie jest naprawdę poważne i realne, jeśli chodzi o konflikt globalny.
Now that's the Prime Minister, by the way, of Poland, who never looks a very happy chappy anyway, but boy, does he look frightened. No doubt about it. So here, America has decided, and really, it's just absolutely amazing. Euphoria is probably the word going throughout America and many parts of the world, that this man is now going to be the president again. He's promised peace, he's promised to bring the troops home, he's promised to solve the Ukraine question in 24 hours. I don't think that'll happen. But anyway, he's certainly made big suggestions about what he's going to be doing, so that what he's done is he's raised and heightened expectations in America that the world is going to enter a new golden age, that certainly the United States will. This is dramatic. This is dramatic. This man is a really unique individual. And here is, to say, the most recent news as of today, this morning, our time. Trump was chosen as the Person of the Year by Time magazine. It's the second time he's been chosen as Person of the Year, and 40 times he's been on the cover of Time magazine. I don't think anybody's ever been, that prominent in the world. Here is a star, a sign in the political heavens that there is something unusual, something outstanding. And we don't know precisely what he will do, of course, but we do know that God's in charge, and he's put a famous man right there to move things along really quickly, prophetically. No doubt about it. Things are moving very, very fast. And as soon as he was elected, a lot of things started to happen. Russia sent more and more troops to the Ukraine border to try and take more territory. They're forging in to try and take as much territory as they can, because they know when Trump comes in, he'll want to sit down at the negotiating table and they will have really no choice. But the more land they've taken from Ukraine, the more they've got to bargain with. And of course, Syria. Well, we'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. All the rebels there who basically said, now's our chance. Before Trump gets in and stops all these wars and maybe bombs us to smithereens, because previously Trump brought ISIS to its knees. ISIS has grown up again in the last 4 years under Biden. But the leader of ISIS, as he was, or a big wheel in ISIS, and then Al-Qaeda before that, has now led the rebels down into Syria to take over. So everybody's about territory now, before the negotiations have to happen. Even the 2-month peace agreement between Israel and Hezbollah is basically timed about the time when Trump comes into office, and then let's sort things out, but let's have a peace treaty in between. He is influencing things around the world already, dramatically. And interestingly enough, and you can debate about this if you like, he's right up there in terms of friends with Israel with Lord Balfour. The Balfour Declaration in 1917, when a friend of Israel, great friend of Israel, Lord Balfour, said it's time for us to rebuild, or to build a new home, rebuild the nation of Israel, give them a home in the land. And Trump has done more than anybody else in the meantime, any particular leader in the meantime, to forward Israel. He's recognised the Golan Heights as sovereign territory. He's moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He's done all sorts of things to support the Jewish people. He is the latter-day Lord Balfour, a true friend of Israel. Now, I mentioned the French situation, the French Prime Minister, again, all these political things that are happening in our world in this year of politics. The French Prime Minister lost his no-confidence vote, and French politics are now very much in turmoil. Mr Macron is more of a liberal left-wing leader. The right-wing votes are coming through the door, and Marine Le Pen, the right-winger, might well become Prime Minister there. As I said, expecting a shift in more friendly relationships with Russia, which, as we know, is going to happen with Goma. Germany's government has collapsed. There was a coalition there of parties that didn't really get on all that well. And so that fractious coalition is broken now. No confidence vote will be held on Monday. They're likely to have to go to new elections and a complete change in direction again towards the right in Germany. And so all these things are helpful towards the building of that confederacy with Russia and the European powers. Things are changing dramatically. Mr Starmer, the new Labour UK Prime Minister, elected in July with a 174-seat majority. And the graph shows his approval rating. The shade there in grey in the middle of that graph is the time of the election campaign. And when it came through the election, here is a huge majority and an approval rating of plus 11. People like him, much more than they like the other people. Now, it's plummeted in a matter of a few months to October, 3 months, down to minus 38 approval rating because of terrible leadership and terrible laws that have been brought in. After 3 months in comparison, previous Labor leader, Tony Blair, after 3 months, his approval rating was plus 46%. So, at the present time, everybody is dissatisfied with their politicians, and that's part of the signs of our times. The Reform UK party, Nigel Farage, everybody aware of Nigel Farage, the great leader who really brought the Brexit vote about and is now back in politics in a big way. leading the Reform Party. Actually, his party has only got 5 seats in the Parliament out of 600 odd seats. Only got 5 seats, but his approval and potential voting for him and his all the people that are in his party at the next elections is bigger than the present government. Could he become the next Prime Minister? Could well be. Will he be pro-Israel? Absolutely. Absolutely. Present one is not. And of course, Elon Musk, anybody ever heard of him? He's now worth more than $400 billion. The richest man by, even more than Putin, because Putin was supposed to have had $200 billion hidden away somewhere, but the richest man. And he put a lot of money into the American election, supporting President Trump, and he has said, it's kind of a whisper still, he's prepared to put £100 million in the kitty for reform in the next election to help them with their advertising and promotion to put Nigel Farage in the Prime Minister's seat. What about on the other side? The axis of evil. People, you recognise those people? Okay, so you've got China, you've got North Korea, you've got Russia, you've got Iran. And they all have, it's quite interesting, isn't it? The democracies, a lot of turmoil, a lot of turnover. In these countries, a lot of internal unrest, but it's suppressed straight away. You know, you disagree, you go to jail or worse. That's what happens in these countries. And they stay in power for a long time. The longest that an American president can be in power is 8 years. In the case of Trump, 4 years, missing 4 years, another 4 years, that's the longest he can be in power. These people can virtually arrange things that they can stay in power for life. Well, there's one Western leader who's challenged, yes, but got long-term power. And hasn't he been magnificent as a leader? Absolutely magnificent. And of course, Netanyahu, 17 years all told, he's been in and out of power a couple of times, but he has the maturity, he has the vision, he has the determination, the resolve to put Israel where it needs to be. God's put this man there. The Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and he's put Netanyahu there. Stars falling from heaven. Well, here's a literal one. During the year, the president of Iran was killed in a helicopter crash. Nobody quite knows why. Suggestion was the weather, but was there something else involved? We don't know. No matter. But God said, no, time for that one to go. Signs in the sun, moon and stars. And the stars will fall. Stars are falling, no doubt. Stars, leaders of Hamas and of Hezbollah, look at the numbers there, or Israel says it nicely, eliminated. They don't use the word assassinated because they think assassinated is too good a word. You know, these people don't deserve to be well enough thought of as to be assassinated. We eliminate them, and many, many of them. And that certainly has helped Israel. Israel, in terms of their dealing with the terrorists, early on in the war against Hamas, they were really just fighting soldier to soldier, you know, soldier to soldier. You know, to go to one house and shoot, and another house and shoot, and maybe a tank would blow up something, and soldier to soldier. When Netanyahu went to America and met with President Trump at his place in Mar-a-Lago, it was only a week or so after President Trump had been shot in the ear, and they talked about assassinations. And Netanyahu was reminded by Trump, remember what we did when I was the president? We assassinated, we took out the leader of ISIS, and ISIS fell apart. We took out the head of the Iranian army, Soleimani. We took him out, and the Iranian army tended to disintegrate for quite a while. We took out the chief atomic weapons scientist, and that put the atomic weapon program back. Go for the leaders, because President Biden has said, we're not giving you any more heavy weapons. We're not going to give you any more heavy bombs. You're bombing out too many people all at once. So they're only given, lighter weapons. And I think they agreed between themselves, because soon after Netanyahu went back, they started taking out the leaders. Smaller weapons required, a rocket at a particular place, or a bomb here, or some sort of gun, operation to take out the leaders, and that's helped them fall apart. The other, of course, was anybody carrying a beeper on their belt? Look out. Blew up all the little walkie-talkies and things. Wow! Amazing. Nobody would have thought of that. Israel put it together. And so they decided that if you take out as they call it now, the head of the snake, that will take the snake away. And that's what they've concentrated on doing, concentrating on the head. Now, falling star. Last couple of weeks now, we said the stars are going to fall from heaven. Watch a falling star in Syria. There on the left, the former president of Syria, who was president up until a couple of weeks ago. Everything seemed hunky-dory. Along comes the terrorists. And by the way, he might be considered the leader, but there are something like 28 different factions of terrorists, all prepared to cut the heads off. Sorry to say that. All prepared to eliminate people, in other streams of the terrorists. But generally speaking, these terrorists are of the Sunni persuasion of the Muslims, and those that were opposed to them, Iran, and their own president, he was a Shiite, and they fight dramatically amongst themselves. Well, whether they'll knit together or not, we don't know. But look, watch a falling star. After this started, this civil war, rebels are closing in. The Syrian Republic is gone. President Assad is gone, and the rebels in the grey have taken over the whole country as quick as that. It's incredible, isn't it? Is God behind that? Absolutely, God's behind that. A great enemy of Israel, where all the bases for Iran to send their weapons down through Syria into southern Lebanon for Hezbollah to use, send them down for Hamas to use, bases used by the Russians, bases used by the Turks, all sorts of weapon stashes and chemical weapons, all now gone. And Israel has made sure of that. So the Shiite present, as it was known, the Shiite, of course, that portion of the Muslims who are very, very violent, prepared and only want the destruction of Israel, had that whole crescent under their control, generally speaking in big parts of Iraq, through Syria, and they would ship their weapons down to Lebanon and to Hamas with the intention, basically, of increasing their Shiite influence and destroying Israel. Well, that's gone. That's gone. Notice, however, that a lot of countries have still got interests there. All those little black dots you can see there are oil wells owned by the Americans. The Americans have owned all those oil wells in there. Now, they've kept a number of troops in there, only about 900, to protect those oil wells. Well, now they're going to have to take in a lot more, and they've started sending their planes in to bomb the ISIS people who have taken over that northern area, and to try and stop their oil wells from being taken from them. Turkey has got a lot of influence in there. They're trying to hold their positions of influence in the north. But what has Israel done? Israel has said, well, first of all, what's happening with Russia? We will warn Russia, we are going to bomb the ports. We're going to bomb the ports because we want to bomb out the Syrian Navy. We're going to bomb out other bases close to Russia's air base as well. And so Israel gave notice. And Russia moved their ships out of the ports. Whoa. They limped out of the ports, anchored somewhere off there in the Mediterranean. That port was, they thought, was their big toehold in the Middle East. And the ships are now well out of the port, and Israel has destroyed the ships of the Syrian Navy and many other facilities for weapons right throughout Syria. But what are we told? Russia's going to come back. Now, this is what we're told in Ezekiel. And we wondered perhaps, well, what does it mean? Russia's got bases in the Middle East already. Well, now it doesn't look like they have. They're not going to have those bases there. And, of course, they're quite weak. They need their power back up there to try and consolidate their position in Ukraine. But what's going to happen? They're going to put hooks in their jaws and bring them forth. So whilst they might link back up to Russia, time's going to come, not too far away, we don't know exactly when, but not too far away, when God says, right, now it's time to come down. I'm ready to draw you down, to judge you in the battle of Armageddon. And they will come down, Daniel says, with many ships in that day. So the rebel leader who's overtaken Syria says, the middling is over. Hezbollah is, they can't keep on supporting Hezbollah. They can't support Assad, the president of Syria, who was cruel to his people and gassed his own people to death sometimes and committed all sorts of atrocities on his own people because of that sectarian, disagreements amongst them all. Gone to as the home they once had for Iran's weapons stockpiles. Well, some of those groups, as I said, there's 28 rebel groups, were filmed here, and I won't show the film itself, saying, okay, we've taken over Damascus, we control Syria, next we're coming for Jerusalem. We want the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount. Well, no way in the world. So they've warned Israel that it's not going to happen. Israel is far too strong.
Israel has launched a sweeping offensive that has decimated Syria's military capabilities over the past 2 days, effectively eliminating its navy and crippling strategic defence infrastructure. The Israeli Defence Forces, IDF, conducted 350 precision strikes on key targets in an operation called Beishan Arrow, focusing on air defences, weapon stockpiles, and missile production facilities across Damascus, Homs, Tartus, Latakia, and Palmyra.
This collapse is a direct result of our forceful action against Hezbollah and Iran, Assad's main supporters. It set off a chain reaction of all those who want to free themselves from this tyranny and its oppression.
Among the most devastating blows, the Israeli Navy destroyed 15 ships at Syrian ports, wiping out the country's naval force. The IDF estimates that 80% of Syria's former defence capabilities have been neutralised. Israeli Defence Minister Israel Katz stated that the campaign was necessary to prevent weapons from falling into extremist hands following the ousting of Bashar al-Assad by Syrian opposition rebels. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu extended a conditional offer of cooperation to Syria's new leadership, warning that any support for Iran or Hezbollah would provoke a strong Israeli response.
Absolutely. So Israel now is in control. Israel is in charge. Israel is now the master of the Middle East. This is a huge change. And it's all come about since the 7th of October. It's all changed. Israel is now in control. Israel is now ready to dwell safely. To dwell confidently, as the word means. Ezekiel chapter 38, we know, we've been wondering, when's this going to happen? No walls, no bars, no gates. Do they need them anymore? No, they don't need them. Because anything that was likely to cause them trouble within shooting range is gone. You know, when they went through towards Iran a month or so ago, with their jets, they took out all of the air defence systems all through Syria and into Iran. If you take out the rocket launchers, they can't fire the rockets. You know, everybody's worried because Hezbollah had 150,000 rockets. Yes, they had 1,000 launches, and Israel's destroyed them all. You can't do much without a rocket launcher. So Israel is in control. Next thing is the Abraham Accords. And we know that Saudi Arabia is just waiting in the wings for the Abraham Accords to come and embrace them as well. And they will work together with Israel to solve the Palestinian question. And Joel chapter 3 tells us that. So right now we're in Joel chapter 3. Have a quick look at Joel 3. Daniel Hosea, Joel. And we've got a few more minutes and not many more. And so with your hopefully acceptance, we'll just look at a few more things and then wrap it up. So, Joel chapter 3, and we know that Joel chapter 3 talks about Armageddon. In the first two verses, all nations are being gathered to the valley of Jehoshaphat to plead with them there for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land, and so on. And you come down to verse 11, proclaim ye this among the nations, prepare war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let your plowshares into swords, your pruning hooks into spears, and this is Armageddon. In the meantime, right there at that time when this is being prepared, verse 4 says, we've got to deal with Tyre and Zidon and all the coasts of Palestine. Tyre and Zidon is southern Lebanon, where Hezbollah are. The coast of Palestine, Gaza, where the old Philistines were. There's the only time the word Palestine appears in our Bible, by the way. All the coasts of Palestine. So the Palestinians have to be dealt with. Will you render me a recompense? In other words, are you going to do something terrible to me, says God? Because if you touch my people, you're doing it to me. Right? Well, I'm going to pay you back. I'm going to render you a recompense upon your own head. That's exactly what we've seen happen. And then the next few verses go on to talk about the fact that whereas in time gone by in history, the people of Tyre and Sidon in that area and the Philistines used to kidnap Israelis at the time when Israel was weak, the people of Israel, and sell them off as slaves through the port of Tyre. There's a record of that in Ezekiel, that they did that. That there was a slave trade conducted through Tyre. You sold my people off as slaves. You desecrated my holy places. Verse 5, you've taken my silver and my gold, carried it into your temples, and so on. You've sold my people off to the Grecians, that is the people of Europe, and that's where many of the Jews lived for hundreds and hundreds of years through the centuries in Europe, because they've been driven out into Grecia, which is the opening for Europe itself. So I'm going to bring them back from where you sold them in verse 7, and I'm going to return your recompense, your payback on your own head. I'm paying you back, and I'm going to sell your sons and your daughters into the hand of the children of Judah. Do you think that's happened? Are those people in Gaza and in southern Lebanon now under the control of the Jews? Absolutely they are. Absolutely they are. The future of Gaza and the future of the areas occupied by Hezbollah is in Israel's hands now. Nobody else's. What are they going to do with them? We're told we will sell them off to the Sabaeans. And who are the Sabaeans? Do you know? Sheba? You know who they are? Saudi Arabia. The Sabaeans are the people of Saudi Arabia. The people of Saudi Arabia have got all the money and all the interest in solving the Palestinian question. And what we're told is they'll be sold afar off, verse 8. So they won't be in a two-state solution, which was never a solution. There will never be a two-state solution. It will be that those Palestinians who might call themselves refugees, whatever, are sent back or taken back by the Arabs to look after them. And Saudi Arabia's got the money, the interest, and needs the labour to expand. And that's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's plan. He hasn't spoken it out loud yet, but that's his plan. The Bible tells us that's his plan, is to bring those people, to give them, as he said in an interview a year or so ago, we want to give the Palestinians a better life. He didn't say in the interview, a state. We want to give them a better life. And they will have a better life. They go to that land, they dwell amongst their Arab brothers and sisters and prosper. All right, so that's the plan. It's God's payback time. So as we said, Lebanon, the Palestinians will be sold in the hands of the Sabaeans, and Israel will dwell safely with no walls, bars or gates. And then, verses 9 to 17, Armageddon. So the road to ruin is in front of Mr. Putin. Down with his ships, down upon the land, a cloud to cover the land, down into Egypt and back up to Jerusalem for Armageddon. So the year 2024, the year of the ballot and the bullet. And what is 2025 going to be like? Will we make it to 2025? Still got a few days to go yet. But let's assume we make it to 2025. The question is, why are we still here? Why haven't we been taken to judgment? Question on all of our minds, really. We're in the final phase. As we said, the last verse of Daniel chapter 12 and what Jesus talks about at the end of the world when the angels are sent forth, that's the terminology for our time. We don't know when it will be, but the final phase is a phase of resurrection and reckoning and reward. So the time of the end, literally speaking, has gone. It started in 1917 when the King of the South pushed King of the North out of the land. The time of the end, the King of the South pushes at him. It goes right through to October last year. And now we are in the last time, the very last time, the very end of things. Brothers and sisters and young people, there are no more time periods given in the Scripture. We're given time periods. There are no more given that need to be accomplished before the Lord's return and the resurrection. That's how close we are. No more time periods. And Daniel's told, you will stand in your lot at the end of the days. So we read in Matthew 24 about the thief, didn't we? If the good man of the house knew in what watch, you know what a watch is? In the watch of the night, you'd have 4 watches, I think, of 3 hours through the night, 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock, 9 till 12, 12 till 3, 3 till 6 a.m. What watch? So we're narrowing it down. What watch the thief will come? And if we knew, we would have watched. We wouldn't have suffered the house to be broken up. So be ready. In such an hour as you think like. That's how close we are now. The hour. We are down to the hour that the thief will come. When will the thief come? Treasure's there. Treasure's there when the Lord returns to take his treasure. When will he come? Well, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. It's there on the screen, no need to turn to it. But notice what it says of the times and the seasons. Now the times, the word time is the word in the Greek chronos, means long periods of time. Chronology, chronos, long periods of time. Seasons are shorter periods of time. There's 4 seasons in a year, shorter periods of time. Then there's the night, the watch, the hour. And we're down to the hour. So, times and seasons, we don't know. Well, we do know. Sorry, we do know. We know the times and the seasons. We know where we are. Okay? We do know. There's a day coming when the thief will come. And then there's a watch. And then there's an hour. And we're right here in that very last narrow period of time. When they shall say, notice this, peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. You know who the they are who say peace and safety? Who are the they? They are all the people in the world, right? Not the ecclesia. Okay? He says, I don't want you to sorrow like others who have no hope. You know the times, you know the seasons. You are the ones in the know. They will say peace and safety. Now, right now, Trump is promising peace and safety. Everybody's looking for peace and safety. Everybody's looking for a time when the wars will come to conclusion, and maybe they will. Early next year, maybe they will. And Israel will say, all our neighbours are no more trouble to us. Take down the bars and the walls and the gates. Let's live peacefully. We'll even try and make friends with the Syrian rebels. Let's try and be peaceful with everybody. Peace and safety, they will say. Then comes sudden destruction, as travail upon a woman with child. And you know when Daniel says in Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, a time of trouble such as never was, that word is related in Jeremiah to travail. Travail of a woman with child. Time of trouble such as never was. So that's where we are. They shall not escape. So there's the times, the big time periods, we know them, we've seen them all come to pass. The seasons, the shorter periods of time, we've seen them come to pass. They're those periods probably, like those periods in Daniel 12, 1260, 1290, 1335 days. The longer periods of time in Daniel are the 20 years, that ended in 1917, the 2300 years, which ended in 1967, the long periods. We know the times and the seasons, they've all happened. Are we down to the day? Are we down to the watch? Or are we down to the hour? Look at it graphically. Big times, it's so narrowing down, seasons, day, watch, hour. And that's where we are. We knew what hour the thief would come, we would watch. Let's be watching, everybody. And when he comes, are we going to be the treasure that he is seeking?